What is up? Good morning and welcome to Monday's Hangxiety. This is Club Fantasy's weekly recap show where we look over all of the action we've seen for this past week and let you know when it is time to panic and when it is time to chill the fuck out. That's the whole point of the show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, my good friend Josh Hudson. First and foremost, Josh, everybody tuning in, Merry Christmas if you celebrate it. Happy holidays if you don't. I hope everybody's had a great weekend so far. Josh, how you doing?
I'm tired working in the service industry on Christmas weekend, especially in a hotel where we're open. Whoo! It was rough.
I feel like
we were busy. We had games on, people wanting to watch football and drinking. It was a lot of fun and very tiring. And I have a lot of things to say.
Yeah. I feel like the wonderful contrast that this show has developed into, and not to say I don't miss Kira and wish her all the best. She was with us when this show started, but the fact that for various reasons, Mondays are such a rough fucking day for you. And I just wake up like ready to go, like, cause I don't work for those that don't know. Whereas Josh isn't even hungover today. He's just fucking tired because he busted his ass slaving over people's drinks and food yesterday. So
basically, yeah, it was so weird too, because like this Saturday was the first like full slate of football games that I've worked this entire season.
Yeah.
And so like I make sure to put Red Zone on the one TV that I can see. So like while I'm making drinks and taking care of people, I've got like one eye on the TV, and some people, like the servers, are trying to get my attention. I'm like, hold on, there's football on.
What just happened? Boy, and I bet that was rough having the Eagles arguably their most important.
Well, I had the
season.
sound on for that one.
Okay.
I made sure to put that on so that I could hear it. So there were definitely some moments that I caught, some moments that I missed, but overall I got the big picture. We lost, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much. But I have things to say about it, which I know.
Oh, we're going to talk about that for sure. First and foremost, Zara, I don't think I get your comments up on the screen enough. Good morning, buddy. I don't know what this is. This happens every week where we just get boxes. I'm guessing he's using emojis that don't translate well to YouTube. So.
No, they don't translate on StreamYard. You can go back and view them.
Oh, okay. There you go. Because I'm like,
it's like it's like the iPhone versus Android thing, right? You know, like people on iPhones, they'll use certain emojis. And if you have an Android phone, you try to view it. It's like, I have a big box with an X on it. I can't see this. What is this?
I think
then you get the whole like anti-Android crowd.
Well, I think Zara. Yeah, well, I think Zara is easily our hippest viewer because he has the emoji in the name, and then he just speaks in emojis. But half the time, it just looks like hieroglyphics that I don't understand at this point. My old ass.
We're old.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, we're going to do the quick recap. Fair warning, as Joshua has mentioned, he worked all day yesterday, and I actually did the Christmas thing and spent time with my family for whatever reason. So neither one of us watched a down of Sunday football for the most part. So we're box score scouting.
Oh, I watched some of the 1 o'clock. I did catch that.
Okay. I did not. I literally didn't watch a single down. Marlia kept offering. Marlia is rewatching that show Bones, and I let her just have the TV since, you know, she like works her ass off to provide this great life. I said, no, you can have the TV for one day of the year. Thursday night.
A good house husband.
Right? Why wouldn't she want to stay with me? Thursday night, Jacksonville dismantled the New York Jets in the rain. Probably ended Zach Wilson's career. Not a great night from Trevor Lawrence, but he did enough for a 19-3 victory. Saturday was the big slate this week. Buffalo takes down Chicago in frigid temperatures. I found it interesting for Chicago and Cleveland, the coldest games in the history of those two stadiums. But Buffalo beats their ass 35-13 in Chicago. Cleveland blows their playoff chances for the second consecutive year. The Saints beat them 17-10.
And that $230 million is going to good use, let me tell you.
So in their defense, it was terrible. We've talked about it. I'm not going to get into the Deshaun Watson personal stuff. In their defense, I kind of felt like this was always going to be a write-off year. Next year is where we can start shitting on Cleveland about that money. Kansas City handles Seattle.
I'm going to shit on Cleveland for that money for many obvious reasons. So
yeah, and that's fair. Kansas City beats Seattle 24-10. Minnesota, just these one-score games. They sneak by the
luck
Giants.
has to run out at a certain point, right? Kirk Cousins has the most
not in the regular
fourth quarter comebacks in a season. in NFL history. That is some wild stats. Wild. For all of this talk, like primetime Kirk sucks, the dude is getting it done in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Well, I felt like that's such an interesting thing because, like you said, we want to create this narrative that he's terrible when everybody's watching, but it's clearly not true. It's just anecdotal at this point. So Cincinnati hangs on to beat the Patriots 22-18. Carolina, we're going to talk about this game later, beats the hell out of Detroit 37-23. Baltimore downs Atlanta 17-9. Houston, holy shit. I think we all called
it on Wednesday.
I was just going to say, I think we all called this. The upset over Tennessee 19-14. San Francisco just continues to look like a great team with a Mr. Irrelevant at quarterback, 37-20 over Washington.
Told Dallas, you Heineke would get benched.
I meant to text you when it happened. I started laughing and Marlia couldn't figure out what I was laughing at. I explained it to her. Dallas, thrilling game, best game of the weekend by far, 40-34 over Philadelphia. Pittsburgh scores a touchdown with less than a minute remaining to beat the Vegas Raiders 13-10. And then, of course, Sunday, Green Bay gets gifted from Tua 3 fourth quarter interceptions, 26-20. The Rams beat the hell out of Denver. This one's almost as confusing as the Carolina game, 51-14. And then Tampa Bay with the overtime victory to keep their hopes alive. They take down Arizona 19-16. We have a lot to talk about in these games. We're going to hope we get to all the segments in the show. It's probably running over again. I'm just going to warn everybody. But as we always do, up with the birds. Josh Hudson, talk to us about those Philadelphia.
Look, the loss is painful. Anytime you go into a game with a backup quarterback, you're just hoping for the best, right? Gardner Minshew delivered. Like, straight up, for most of the game, he outplayed Dak. From what I caught from this game, 355 yards passing, 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, was very Jalen Hurts-esque from just that box score. The problem, and this goes back to how and why we lost to Washington earlier in the year, turnovers.
Yep.
Minshew was responsible for 3 of those 4 turnovers. The other was a Miles Sanders fumble. So I'll credit Dallas on that. That is how you beat Philly. When they turn the ball over, it's like basically both of our 2 losses, we have 8 combined turnovers.
Yeah.
So you know, 4 turnovers in a game, if you hit that threshold, you probably can beat Philly at this point.
Yeah.
But because when you look at like the opposite ends of the defense, Dallas had 0 sacks.
Yep.
Against our stout offensive line. 0 sacks, and they have arguably the best pass rusher in the NFL in Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
But they had 4 turnovers. Philly had, I believe, 1.
Yeah.
Right? So, but we sacked the quarterback 6 times because we've got 4 guys on our defense that right now are pushing towards 10 sacks if they haven't hit it yet. So, like, it's just, but the yards, right? I mean, these are 2 really good offenses, 2, I think, probably more overrated defenses. I think Philly, the back half of their secondary is starting to yield a lot more yards, which is why I told you guys on Sunday or Saturday, excuse me.
Oh, yeah, CeeDee Lamb.
This is CeeDee Lamb, and it's not close for me.
Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong, Waddle had a great game as well, but they were going to pepper CeeDee Lamb. He is their entire offense. He's going to find a way to get open, and they're just banking on rushing the quarterback and dropping back into zone. CeeDee Lamb is a very good route runner in zone coverage. He knows how to find. Yeah, they really are good, Jake. They really are good.
Too damn good.
Yeah, well, I mean, all 5 of them were either Pro Bowlers or Pro Bowl alternates.
Yep.
Like, I don't think that's ever happened in NFL history. So it's, it's that. But
the thing that bothered me about the game, and I'll let you keep going, obviously, the thing that bothered me about the game was they ran the read option or QB option, however you want to refer to it, with Minshew often, at least once a drive, if not once every set of 4 downs. He only ran the ball 4 times this game. And I don't know how effective it is I don't know if Minshew was just told not to run or if he just was making the decision not to run the entire game. But I watched him put that ball into Sanders' gut and he never took it out. And there were plays where it looked like he could have gained yards if he had held on to the ball. So I don't know if that's out of practice by Gardner Minshew, because that's not the offense he ran in Jacksonville. But you'd think he'd be used to it by now. And he can scramble. Obviously, he had the rushing touchdown. I just found it very interesting how little he ran the ball in an offense that's built for the quarterback to run the football.
Well, I think so. You see a lot of times these RPOs, right, where the quarterback basically is putting the ball in the running back's gut and then has the option to pull it and run himself, right? But then you have these like zone read options, which look like the exact same play, but it's still just a handoff.
Yeah, and that's what they did the whole damn game.
And really, when you look at it, you look at Jalen Hurts and his body type is vastly different from Gardner Minshew. Gardner's not going to be a guy that is taking it and running it right up the gut and taking that type of punishment the way that Jalen Hurts does. So I think a lot of this was more by design to make the defense think that they're going to run the exact same style of play that Jalen Hurts does, but just let Miles Sanders do his thing. And again, this was a big reason why I wasn't high on Miles Sanders this week. Everybody was like, oh, he's going to eat. He's going to have that. He had the carries. 20 yards or 20 carries, 65 yards. That's it. And they do not throw to the running back this year. They just haven't done it. I was actually surprised that Kenny Gainwell had 4 catches in this game.
Yeah.
But because it's just not their offense. It's we're going to look at the wide receivers and then it's our running back running the football and our quarterback running the football. Like, that's going to be what it is. And hats off to Devonta Smith. That dude made some fucking phenomenal catches in this game. On the sideline, scored twice. The big one over the middle where he, extends up. I'm like...
Well, that was right after one of the sideline catches. That was like back-to-back amazing catches. So.
That dude is absolutely legit. And for anybody out there that plays Dynasty, I don't care that he's the number 2 option on this offense. If you can go get Devonta Smith for a lot less than paying for a number 1 wide receiver, fucking do it.
I mean, and we have to get – that's a great point to bring up, and I'll let you continue with the Eagles. But we have packages like that in the NFL right now. The 3 that come to mind outside – or the 2 that come to mind outside of the Eagles are Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and then T. Higgins and Jamar Chase.
Yep.
Miss me with this wide receiver 2 nonsense. They're both on the field 180 to 100% of the snaps. You want these guys on your football team, especially in Dynasty.
Okay, breaking news that just came in. Right tackle Lane Johnson to miss the rest of the regular season with a torn abdominal tendon. Thankfully, he could be back for the playoffs.
He went down, I think, in the second quarter in that one.
Yeah, and so he goes down in the second quarter. Micah Parsons still doesn't have a single sack. What does that tell you?
Yep.
Just saying. Like these guys, the offense worked just fine. And for somebody that hadn't started a game all season, they hang 34 points. Like, Dallas needed to hang on to win this game.
Yeah.
If Jalen Hurts is at quarterback, I don't think it's a 6-point game. I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't think so at all.
Yeah.
If you can't sack Gardner Minshew, Hurts would have went off in this game. So
exactly. I mean, for all the faults of the Eagles defense over the last couple of weeks, and especially in this game, Dallas's defense has a lot more to worry about, in my opinion. Like, the one team in the NFC that I'm most worried about is San Francisco, just because of the way that they've been playing, especially on defense, because their rush defense has been absolutely phenomenal. So, yeah. Kudos to Dallas. You guys did your thing. You handled business. Again, not that worried about it. Hurts hopefully will be back this week against the Saints. I don't think it's going to take much to beat them, even if he does play. And then I believe we close out the season against the Giants, which, again, not 100% worried. We get 1 win out of these last 2. We've got the number 1 seed in a bye week. Hurts can heal up. We should be good.
You bring up a very interesting point. Dallas's last 3 games, Houston, Jacksonville, Philadelphia, they have 1 QB sack total in those games. They are living and dying by the turnover. Plus, they have allowed more than 23 points in each of those 3 matchups. So they're definitely...
That's a playoff defense if I've ever seen one.
I say that's rough, the 1 QB sack. I know because I have DeMarcus Lawrence in a few of my IDP leagues, and I've had to bench him. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, I need you to get your shit together. I do want to quickly touch on, before we get to our Manscaped stuff, we have some of our playoff victory laps going on in the chat right now. So, Czar, that's awesome.
Love it.
I had 21 teams this season. I had 12 that made the semis. I think I'm going to go 5-7. I think I'm looking at 5 championship teams this year. So,
very good.
Not as good as Czar. 50% in the
Yeah,
finals.
right. The 50% is
awesome.
good. I think I was in 19. I don't know how many of them were like charity or best ball or anything like that, but I was going through and looking. I still have a couple that are coming down to tonight. I have one where I need I think I need 14.6 points from Keenan Allen. Okay. Now, mind you, I have Mike Williams on my bench, so I could very easily flip those if I need to. But I think I trust Keenan Allen more in this game than I do Mike Williams.
I need roughly 60 points from Keenan Allen tonight. So,
but I hung on in one of them where my opponent needed like 33 points combined from DeAndre Hopkins and Mike Evans last night, and that worked out in my favor, thankfully.
We don't often do this, but let's give the club fantasy team some kudos because we were very leery on both of those wide receivers and told people to find alternatives. And man, do we look pretty damn smart. Unfortunately, I did have to choose between the two of them in one league. I went Evans and he scored triple the points, but that's just three versus one.
Yeah. We're going to get to DeAndre Hopkins in a little bit, but 10 targets and 1 catch?
Yeah.
Damn.
That's rough.
Oof.
Ballsy call. I don't know if you started Cam Akers because you had to or if you chose to, Anthony, but there's a clap for you, buddy.
Brother,
because RB1 on the week.
We'll talk more about Cam Akers here in a little bit in a couple different sections, actually.
Yeah, that was absolutely nuts. Josh, I love this whole section. I love that you added it last week, but the guys that people were relying on this week, we're going to pour one out because your fantasy season is probably over because these guys shit the bed. I know I can point to some of my woes in the leagues that I'm not in the finals to quite a few of these guys. Geno Smith, 200 yards, a touchdown, and interception, and 16 rushing yards, 14 fantasy points. Not what you want.
By the way, I started Geno over Jared Goff in quite a few leagues, and I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, I will say I started Gardner over Geno in quite a few leagues, and I am happy.
Fair enough.
To a T with a 300-yard performance, but could only find the end zone one time in the aforementioned
192 yards and a touchdown in the first half.
Yeah.
And that's his final stat line.
Yep. Justin Fields, rough day. Only 11 rushing yards, I think, is the
yeah. That's the big issue there. I mean, those conditions were prime for him to run the football. And the dude only has 11 rushing yards, really?
Yeah. Latavius Murray, I understand he's had some pretty good weeks lately. He did come into this game injured along with Chase Edmonds coming back in this game, but 34 rushing yards.
This was game script for him, though.
Yep.
I mean,
that
game got way
whatever the hell happened in that game. Miles Sanders, just a rough day.
2 in a row. Two duds in a row.
That's going to come up later, but 65 rushing yards plus the lost fumble. When he lost that fumble, Marleo's heart actually broke for him. We watched that whole game. I didn't care about the other game, and we're going to talk about the NFL scheduling in a second too. But we watched that entire game, and Marlea has an affinity for running backs because of how much smaller they are than everybody else on the field. And so she just thinks they're adorable, which is hilarious. But Miles Sanders, if you did not see it, Josh, was fucking broken on the bench after that fumble, and they kept showing him. Marlea's heart just broke for this guy. It was awful. She said it's going to haunt her nightmares from this point forward, seeing how sad.
Anytime those types of turnovers, especially in a close game like that
against Dallas,
they end up very costly. And look, sucks, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Josh Jacobs, and I know he's on the list. I assume he's on the list. Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams. There are people who are very disappointed about paying up for Josh Jacobs, maybe 2 first-round picks.
I had one team where I had Ramondre Stevenson and Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
This was the one I was telling you where I needed.
Think of it, I think I
needed D-Hop and Evans to suck to move on. And thankfully, on that same team, I have Justin Jefferson and Saquon Barkley and Jamar Chase and Terry McLaurin. So they help kind of carry the load. It's one of my dynasty teams. But yeah, dude, I was sweating after those two dropped the fucking dud last night.
Well, interestingly enough,
I'm
just going to list all these running backs because I feel like you pointed out something really interesting that has them all in common. So Josh Jacobs, J.K. Dobbins, Brian Robinson, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson, and Bam Knight. Every one of those guys scored under 6 fantasy points. Every one of those guys did jack shit in the passing game. And while for some of them that was weird, Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones, these other guys,
especially Swift.
Yeah, well, DeAndre Swift, that's all he's doing. Ramondre Stevenson, that's all he was supposed to be doing. But when you look at guys like Dobbins and Brian Robinson, this is the danger of starting these non-pass catching running backs, that if they don't score a touchdown, you get fewer than 6 fantasy points and you're watching the finals instead of playing in them. And I feel like that's the issue we're starting to see. I was so glad you have Ramondre Stevenson on here because I have issues. Wide receiver, it was interesting. It was almost predictable. Mike Evans, Garrett Wilson both had rough nights. So Wilson, you could kind of blame it on the weather. He did lose that fumble to end the game, which probably cost you 1 or 2 fantasy points.
I blame that more on Zach Wilson than anything.
Well, let's just blame everything on Zach Wilson. So Juju Smith-Schuster, rough night. Christian Kirk, again, the weather didn't really play into passing. And Jacksonville didn't have to pass that much. Stephon Diggs, again, weather, though personally, I felt like the weather was kind of overblown in those games. It was cold. The wind didn't seem to be affecting much, at least in the past.
Yeah, Gabe Davis caught a fucking touchdown.
Yeah, how stupid
seriously, what are we doing?
Devontae Adams, terrible week, 2 catches, 15 yards. Zay Jones couldn't be a bigger fall from his 3 touchdown, 40.
That's specifically why I put him on this list, because a lot of people were rolling him out, and I'm like, dude's gonna get sauced, and dude got sauced.
Yep. Adam Thielen.
This one really hurt.
Yeah, that one really catch for 6 yards, and KJ Osborne, I think, had 1 catch for 8 yards or something like that. So very just rough week for the Minnesota wide receivers not named Justin Jefferson. Traylon Burks, I don't know what you were expecting out of a rookie quarterback, but no targets for no catches and a 15-yard rushing play to get you 1.5 fantasy points. 10 targets for DeAndre Hopkins. If I would have told you coming into this game that DeAndre Hopkins was leaving with 10 targets, you would have been ecstatic. And then when he has 1.4 fantasy points, you would have been very upset. David Njoku, Cleveland offense looked very dysfunctional. 2 catches for 14 yards. Chiga Okonkwo, I put my faith in that rookie again. I look like an idiot. 1 catch for 10 yards. And Juwan Johnson, again, weather. He came into this game a little banged up. 1 catch for 9 yards. Almost every single one of those guys was probably starting in someone's lineup, and you are likely watching the finals instead of playing in them. Josh, do you want to chime in on any of those before we get to the hangover?
No, I mean, a lot of these, like Thielen really irked me because that was a prime matchup. I felt like he should have had a lot more than, 1 catch. But, this was the Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson show. And I have plans to talk about Hawkinson a little bit later. But, David Njoku, Okonkwo, I'm less concerned with Njoku. Like, most people should have been sitting him. Like, the weather in that game, it was 100%. Terrible. It did not play to his favor. With Okonkwo, you were just kind of hoping that,
rookie to rookie.
Yeah. I think he only had 1 target, maybe 3, something like that. But, obviously the 1 catch, certainly 10 yards. Catch. I mean, Malik Willis only had 99 passing yards anyway. So at the end of the day, we knew this game was going to be a big Derrick Henry game, and it was, but it still wasn't big enough because they only scored 2 touchdowns, which, again, we'll talk about him in the next segment.
It's going to be an interesting thing. Anytime someone gives Josh credit, we need to get it up here on the chat. Josh was very much on the D-Hop call, and I can't not get this on the chat. 50% playoffs.
Go, Jay. Good boy.
Absolutely. Love 6 in the championship. That's awesome. That's very similar to what I did this season, Jay. So great job, buddy. We call it the hangover. These are the biggest head scratchers of the week. Josh, I'm going to let you get into yours because you had a lot of really good ones. My first problem is with the NFL in general. And we always bitch about how the NFL slates their games. And with 5 off main slate games, it was a little bit harder this week. But what in the world do you take 11 games and split them 9 and 2 for 9 1 o'clock games and 2 4 o'clock games? Now, in a way, it was great because I got to watch all of Dallas and Philly because I did not care what was going on in San Fran and Washington. But as someone who would prefer to watch Red Zone, we could have done a little bit better than splitting these games 9 and 2 on arguably the most watched day of the NFL because people are off of work. They have Christmas the next day. You had a chance to showcase your product. And maybe that's what they were going for, like just making everybody watch Philly and Dallas. But regardless, I was not a big fan of 9 1 o'clock games and 2 4 o'clock games.
Yeah, it was rough. I mean, especially because I'm thinking okay, cool. I'll have both games on. Like, people can pick and choose what they want. In my area, we only had the Philly Dallas game. We didn't even have the Washington San Fran game on CBS. So I'm like, What the shit?
Yeah.
Like, this is terrible. So, like, we have to go through and, throw on Red Zone just to get updates on San Francisco. And it's like, this is dumb. This doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yep.
I don't know. The NFL and their rules on playing games at the same time, and so it's so dumb.
Very strange. If you took nothing else from our Saturday show, when we said to bench every cold weather kicker and only play people in domes, man, do we look like fucking geniuses. Nick Folk with not one, but 2 missed extra points.
Negative 6 points in some leagues that I saw.
I was just going to say, yep, I penalized those. So congratulations on that one, Faith. Hopefully you're moving on in that league. Josh, go ahead with your head scratchers.
Yeah, I'm going to start my very first one here with Ramondre Stevenson. As I mentioned, look, I get it. They were down 22-0 starting the third quarter. So, like, I'm not expecting, 20-plus carries. But this is a guy that's seen 60-plus targets this year, if I'm not mistaken. They've been using him predominantly in the passing game. And he had 5 targets, 2 catches for 3 yards. That is not a stat line you want from your number 1 running back, who is a pretty predominant force in your passing game. Like, not great, Bob, at all. Like, what are we doing here? Like, I get it. You needed to play catch up. You're looking more down the field. And I'll get into Kendrick Bourne here in a second. And kudos, like Jacoby Myers, finally looking like the guy from the early part of the season who was balling. But, like, why are we not getting arguably your best offensive player involved in this offense when you're down by 22? It does not make any fucking sense to me. And look, I'll give Joe his shout out. He said he wasn't going to play Ramondre. DJ Reader in the middle of that defense, not going to have the opportunities. And you know what? He was shut down from a running perspective.
Oh, excellent call by Joe. Excellent call.
Here's the thing too. You're not going to force feed Ramondre Stevenson on the ground when you're losing by 22 in the second half of the game.
But how does a pass catching running back
not catch passes?
As someone who is heavily invested in Ramondre Stevenson and had him in my home league, the league that I live and die and bleed with, I needed a better game out of him. There were 2 passes at the end of the game that he flat out either ran the wrong route or dropped, and then he fumbled in the fourth quarter to make it worse. So you could argue that Ramondre Stevenson,
if I'm not everything I heard, he fumbled while trying to score, right?
He did, 100%.
I mean, that obviously is a big swing.
I wouldn't even call it trying to score.
Scoring 6,
but 100%, he was on the 2-yard line. It was ugly, but what bothered me most, the fumble is the fumble. But there were 2 catches that could have been 2 PPR points plus yards. Certainly would have looked nice, but Josh, I 100% just discovered this when I went in to look at his targets. He has 78 targets on the season. In 1 fewer game, Leonard Fournette has better passing game numbers than Ramondre Stevenson this season. And that is absolutely nuts to me.
By the way, how about that Rachaad White going to score less than Leonard Fournette? And Rachaad White still had a good game, mind you.
Yeah.
Told you it could happen.
I don't even think we were busting your balls hard about that. But what I was trying to
I know Joe was.
Well, I was too. But the whole thing to me was, when I think downside, I think downside. Josh is out here saying, a 15-point game and a 25-point game, and Rachaad is the downside in that one. So take your victory lap. Certainly, I got the wrong Eagles wide receiver with 2 touchdowns this week, so my streak continues.
No, but overall, though, we did pretty well on our calls from Wednesday. I was going through and I was looking at it yesterday. So aside from Joe and his Trace McSorley love.
Yeah.
Anyway, but my next guy, I'll bring this up, Josh Jacobs. This is what and again, you're looking at running backs, you're looking at the score. This is the complete opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Las Vegas was winning this game. This is a guy that is on pace for 300 plus carries, close to 400 touches this year, and he has 15 carries all game, and you're winning. Like,
not even on pace. He actually crossed 300 carries in this game. So
there you go. What the fuck is Josh McDaniels doing?
Yeah.
You've been running this guy into the ground because you're presumably not going to re-sign him. Like, they caught up with him post-game, and he's like, I'm tired of this shit. I've been tired of it for he's not coming back to Vegas. I can tell you that right now. Unless they franchise him, he's not coming back to Vegas. This game itself just blew me out of, like, I don't get it. If you can't trust Josh Jacobs in a game where he can run the football, Pittsburgh's run defense is very up and down. And granted, they did stop the run a little bit better this week. But like, if you somehow survived, which again, I did survive, and I have a championship game where I have Josh Jacobs. They play San Francisco next week.
Yeah, and how do you bench him? How do you bench a top five running back?
How do you bench Josh Jacobs? But why should I play him against arguably the best run defense in the league right now?
Say, if he's not going to get the volume and the touches he deserves against Pittsburgh, he's not going to get it against San Francisco. So,
and I'm legitimately at a loss because I'm going against the number 1 seed, and this dude's team is stacked to the core. And I have great players. I've got Jamar Chase. I've got Justin Jefferson. He'll have Hurts presumably coming back next week. So I'm just kind of like, I need to maximize my points here. Josh Jacobs isn't maximizing points.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I've got some decisions to make in that one. But yeah, this is just like, that whole Josh Jacobs usage was just baffling to me. Absolutely baffling.
Yeah. Speaking of top 5 running backs letting us down, Josh.
Yeah, this really is just more of like a personal gripe. Like, look, Derrick Henry had a great week. Heading into tonight, he's RB8. Absolutely love it. Fantastic. Rush for 126 yards and a touchdown. You can't really get too mad.
However,
he's run for over 200 yards in 4 straight games against Houston. You're losing. Why are you not just feeding Henry to get another 200 yards to win this game with a backup quarterback who you're not letting throw the football anyway? I don't understand your thinking, Mike Vrabel. I don't get
it. I know the weather wasn't ideal, and I don't want to overreact like people did to Justin Fields, but Malik Willis does not look good right now.
No, not at all. I mean, what do you have, like 40 yards rushing, I think?
Yeah.
Which, I mean that's why people were excited about him coming into the league. And, it's going to take some time for him to develop as a passer. And, we as fans and NFL teams, you have to be patient with these guys. Tannehill is so much better for this team than Malik Willis is, 100%. At least right now. And I know that's not a big secret, but dude,
well, it's interesting, Josh.
Free falling right now.
It's kind of the opposite of what we're seeing in Atlanta, where Matt Ryan was not the right quarterback for the team that they were trying to build, so they moved on. Whereas with this, they drafted the quarterback to move on, but you're going to need to change your offense completely if you're moving on with Malik Willis. So.
Yeah, you need to like a Greg Roman style offense, a Sirianni style offense, but you have to, hope that Treylon Burks stops being so injured next year and develop more as a route runner. And you need another guy opposite him to really make this offense 100%. Work. And
yeah, Robert Woods' experiment is officially over.
So, yeah, it did not work out.
My last head scratcher of the week, and maybe this is because my good friend Josh here has bought me fully into the Detroit Lions run defense.
They picked the wrong week to turn into a pumpkin. Especially on my freaking, downside calls that no Carolina running back would top 8 points.
So
I saw those Chuba Hubbard runs in the first quarter. I'm like, what the fuck are we doing?
At first I was happy because it was Chuba Hubbard. But I told so many people not to play Deontay Foreman this week. This man goes for 165 yards. Chuba Hubbard adds another $125 of his own. Sam Darnold had 19, and DJ Moore added 8. All in all, the Detroit Lions, who Josh will tell you since week 6, I think it was, Josh, as the best rush defense in the NFL, gave up 320 rushing yards in a single game to the Carolina fucking Panthers. And what?
Carolina can win the NFC South.
It's nuts.
They've had 3 different starting quarterbacks this year, and they're on their second head coach. They've already beat Tampa, and they play Tampa in week 18, presumably for the division title.
I want nothing else more than for that to happen. And what's funny is I have Super Bowl bets.
Carolina shouldn't want that to happen because they're going to miss out on a quarterback in the draft.
That's true.
Because let's be honest, you're not rolling into next year with Sam Darnold.
Yeah, very fair point there. But I have Super Bowl bets on Tampa Bay, but that division is such a mess that I want to see
Vegas thanks you for donating your money.
Yeah, no shit. I will say. So what I did, I don't mind sharing this story before we get into Manscaped. I broke down the teams I thought had legitimate chances to make the Super Bowl, and some of them are very bad, Arizona Cardinals again, and some of them are very good, Philadelphia Eagles, Cincinnati Bengals, Buffalo Bills. So what I did was last year I put like $25 on multiple teams or $50 or even $100 on multiple teams to win the Super Bowl. But FanDuel gave me the ability to just predict the Super Bowl, not even the winner. So I'm a math guy. I had 5 teams in each division. I'm like, well, that's 25 matchups. I put $5 on all 25 possible matchups, $125 total. If Cincinnati and Philly make the Super Bowl, that $5 bet pays me $755. So I am rooting for a Cincinnati Philly Super Bowl like crazy. Some of my bets absolutely collapsed. Some of them were certainly a mess. It is what it is. You know what's not a mess? My undercarriage, thanks to Manscaped. Josh, tell the people.
You need to leave the segues to Faith and Joe. Oh, man. This episode of Monday's Hangxiety is brought to you by Manscaped. Manscaped is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for those family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the ultimate men's hygiene bundle, the Performance Package. And because of this whole agreement, Ryan and myself, as well as Joe, were gifted this Performance Package, and the package performs, to put it bluntly.
Fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic. It includes the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, which is a personal favorite of mine, the Crop Preserver groin deodorant. For those that spend a lot of time running and being active, it is a godsend, let me tell you. The Crop Reviver toner, the Performance Boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold all of your goodies. I will say one thing that blew me away out of the gate with this was just the presentation of it when it was sent to us. Like, just opening it, I'm like, oh, man, it feels like Christmas. And we were like a month and a half out from Christmas. It was great. Loved it. Join over 5 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer just for you. Go to manscaped.com. Enter in the promo code CLUBFANTASY at checkout and save 20% off and get free shipping on your entire order. Once again, go to manscaped.com, use promo code CLUBFANTASY, save 20% and get free shipping at manscaped.com.
Boom. I'm just glad that our buddy Czar liked my segue. If I have his stamp of approval, I'm good with it. Guys, we call it the shot of espresso. It was a great performance this past week that got our juices flowing. Josh, go into some of yours. You have some great ones on here.
Oh, I feel I'm going to start with the obvious name, right? Because especially after Saturday, when this dude took a lot of shit from Joe.
Yeah.
Alvin Kamara, buddy. Alvin fucking Kamara finally scored himself a touchdown. Again, this was what you needed in a good matchup in bad weather conditions. Scores a touchdown. Now, granted, Taysom Hill vultured one, so this day could have been better. But I'm not going to complain about 19 fantasy points from a guy that I, likely took in the first or second round to be a presumable RB1, and obviously he has not performed as such. RB7 on the week going into tonight. Again, finally scored a touchdown. Still not a lot of love in the passing game, which still just absolutely baffles me for a guy that consistently gets 80 receiving or receptions every single year. Maybe the weather conditions played into that. I don't know. But 76 yards, a rushing touchdown, 19 fantasy points. That's what I needed. I needed this. Mostly just to tell Joe to shove it.
I gotta be honest. I don't know. Joe gets a lot right. Don't get me wrong. But this week he felt very, very right about everything. So when Kamara scored that touchdown, I was like, thank God, because he was going to be insufferable if Kamara didn't find the end zone. So I was pretty excited to see that touchdown because, man, the Ramondre Stevenson call hurt doubly because Joe just screamed at me about it. And then
he did.
And then
he was very adamant about that one.
Yeah. So.
But my next one, raise your hand if you can tell me who Shane Zylstra is.
Only reason I can is the week after they traded TJ Hawkinson, everybody was like, is it this Brock Wright? Is it James Mitchell? And Zylstra actually scored 1 or 2 touchdowns in that game. And they were talking about, I think his brother's the punter or some shit like that. So it's a family affair.
This man is the Lions' third string tight end.
Yeah.
And scored not 1, not 2, but 3 receiving touchdowns this week in the ultimate that helps no one scenario. Because what we really needed were those short Jamal Williams touchdowns, or
Yep.
God forbid, a DeAndre Swift touchdown. What the fuck? That's all I got. Like, what the fuck?
The Lions seemingly are doing everything they can to make sure DeAndre Swift doesn't look like a good receiving running back. It's
I just don't get it. I really don't. Like, I mean, you look at Minnesota, and they're basically saying, same thing in Miami. We're going to get our best players the football.
Yeah.
And we're so confident in their ability to make that happen that we're just going to keep doing it. And you're not going to throw us off the beaten path.
Yeah, and it speaks volumes to just TJ Hawkinson in general, too. Like, how bad was he being wasted in Detroit?
Exactly. And then you look at a team like Detroit, and it's like, oh, well, we're going to make you think we're going this way, but then we're going to go this way. And it's like, yo, show some love for your fantasy managers. Like, we're the ones that are keeping the NFL afloat right now. Let's be honest here.
To go along with
just like a big fuck you to everybody.
Yeah. To go along with the Shane Zylstra game, I'm going to throw in as my shot of espresso. Jared Goff having a good game on the road. 355 and 3 touchdowns, all obviously to Shane Zylstra. But way more importantly, kudos to Jared Goff. But our buddy Zara is going to be in a situation next week. You have Justin Fields on the road in Detroit, who Josh will tell you is supposed to have a good rush defense. So who are we trusting in this game, Josh? I personally am not ready to throw Lamar back out there. He didn't look good ahead of time. Justin Herbert could prove something tonight. But I think the true question here for Czar is Goff or Fields.
I'm going to preface this as I did last week.
We don't make decisions.
When you ask me fantasy questions on a Monday, I'm reacting and possibly overreacting and not using research and science. So, Czar, ask again on Wednesday or Saturday.
For sure. Yes.
Right now, I'm going to go with Goff because I think at the end of the day, he's the safer option. Like, yes, Fields still has monumental upside over all of these guys right now. But Claypool's out. Mooney's on IR. He's throwing to grocery baggers in a month. Like, yeah. There's really no other way around it. Again, I would like to think that the rush defense in Detroit gets a little better at home, and they look at this tape and they're like, yo, we've been so good. What the fuck happened? Did we get that cocky? Like, so, and again, I'm not saying that their rush defense is going to stop Fields, because Fields is going to get enough on the scrambles and things of that nature. But like, Goff at home is basically a lock for 250 and 2 touchdowns. And sure. I would much rather have that floor in a championship week than I would if I get 113 passing yards and 11 rushing yards like I did from Fields this past week.
But
you know what I mean?
Back in week 10 against Detroit, Fields had 4 total tutties, including 147 yards and 2 on the ground. So it's probably Fields, but I agree.
Well, again, that's what I'm saying. The upside with Fields is astronomical.
Yeah. This feels very similar to the Justin Fields, Justin Herbert question that I got terribly wrong that week. So I'm very interested. Josh, keep with your
and I'll touch on a couple other, no-name guys. I'll start with Kendrick Bourne. Like, he had a pretty solid season last year. And, heading into this year, I'm like, you know what? This is a guy that everybody's sleeping on. Mm-hmm. Maybe we're getting a solid flex play in the 15th round, right? Kendrick Bourne has done absolute nothing all freaking season. They find themselves down 22-0, and all of a sudden he wants to have a 100-yard game and a touchdown. Like, hey, great. Not a damn soul started you, I promise.
He had 0 points last week, right?
He's had big goose eggs in a lot of weeks this year.
Yeah.
And nobody would have seen this coming. Like, at this point, it's like, we've seen flashes from this offense. Like, Mac Jones he's not afraid to throw it downfield. There's just there's so much dysfunction in this offense. They don't know what they're doing. And it probably has something to do with the people that are calling the plays, because they're not offensive coordinators.
Not having an offensive coordinator was an all-time stupid move, and it is paying off wonderfully for people who hate the New England Patriots. So
yeah. So you know what? Shout out Kendrick Bourne, but thanks for nothing, buddy, because ain't nobody started you this week. I maybe in like one of those like deep 22-man leagues or something.
I will give you, yes, I am willing to guarantee in my 32-team league, Kendrick Bourne was in someone's lineup.
Probably. And I'll finish up with Isaiah Hodgins.
Yeah.
This guy's actually flashed over the last month plus,
Really
right? He's had some pretty big games. I actually have him stashed in our Writers League, which hopefully, God willing, I actually make the championship in that one. But, I mean, 11 targets, 8 catches, 89 yards, touchdown, 22.9 fantasy points. I don't think the Giants thought they were going to get this level of production when they put a waiver claim on this undrafted kid going into year 3. So shout out to them for, saying, hey, you know what? We're down to nothing. Let's see what we got, buddy. And you know what? He's showing out. He's been arguably their most consistent wide receiver over the last month.
Hopefully he can get a contract out of it. That's what this end of season's about for a lot of these players. Last guy I'll throw in, sort of a no-name guy. Obviously, he popped earlier in the season. Greg Dortch, while DeAndre Hopkins laid an egg on 10 targets, Greg Dortch caught 10 of 11 targets for 98 yards. Greg Dortch is only really playing right now because Rondale Moore isn't playing. Greg Dortch could be a legit slot wide receiver on a team next year, on a team that needs a legit slot wide receiver. So I'm very interested to see. He's only 24 years old. So I'm interested to see, like Isaiah Hodgins, who's probably the same age now that I think about it, if these guys can turn these end of season performances into, I don't want to call it a career, but at least a 2023 season where they're fantasy relevant. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing. With this Cardinals offense. Like, we talked about it earlier in the year. Like, slot wide receivers in this offense, they get fed.
Yeah, and that's why we were all excited about Rondale Moore.
To Larry Fitzgerald, Rondale Moore's popped. I mean, Dortch had the big fill-in games earlier in the year, and now he's doing it again with Rondale Moore on IR. And Dortch has some juice,
but I think
some giddy up.
I think my favorite narrative that I'm not giving us credit for discovering it, but it's something we have talked about on our show for as long as I've been a part of our show. Backup quarterbacks fucking love backup wide receivers. And we just see it time and time again. And Trace McSorley comes in and just feeds Greg Dortch, who probably spent so much time on the practice field together. I just love seeing shit like that.
Yes, sir.
Next segment is the morning mimosas. We got that tingly feeling that big things are coming. I think we're both kind of just focusing on what could happen next year, though both of your guys could pop for the rest of this season the way everything's been going. So, Josh, we have all the Cam Akers chat going on in the chat. So why don't you go ahead and talk to the people about Cam?
Yeah, I mean, look, as good as Denver's defense has been this year, I just think that they're done. They're so deflated. Russell Wilson can't get this offense going. Nathaniel Hackett should not survive Black Monday this year.
No, has to be gone.
Like, this is just like a bad experiment gone horribly wrong, and they just need to blow this shit up because they don't have any first-round picks. I would not be shocked if they moved Jerry Jeudy for picks. I would not be shocked if they try to trade Cortland Sutton and just say, you know what, we've just got to do what we can to try to make it work with Russ because we've invested so much in him, but we got to give him a head coach that, can actually do something. Obviously things change when they, hopefully get Javonte Williams back next year, but like, and the defense is good, but again, when you don't have any support, you're on the field so long, you get winded. And you know what? Hats off to McVay and the Rams and especially Cam Akers, because we've both been banging this drum. Like, Achilles injuries for running backs suck. And you never really know when a player is going to bounce back from this type of injury because it takes a lot of time to gain that level of explosiveness back. And especially for the player to trust their body at that instance as well. I think this is like the first game this year where Akers has been over 5 yards per carry by the end of it. I don't know if you want to look that up or not. But 23 carries, 118 yards, and 3 touchdowns. We know all the midseason turmoil around Cam Akers. Requesting a trade, wasn't getting any work, looked like dog shit. Nobody wanted to trade for him. McVay just basically sat him down, let him cool off. Obviously, then they bet on Cam Akers, right? They released Darrell Henderson.
Yeah, which was
knowing
nuts.
They were going to get Kyron Williams back.
And Henderson not being able to get a job is even more nuts because he had a cup of coffee.
It's telling. I'm telling you.
Yeah. So.
And Cam Akers right now, he's starting to get the volume. And this is what I love to see is that you see some of these players that when they only get 10 to 12 carries in a game, they're just not very effective because it's just not how they are built.
He needed the volume. Exactly.
23 carries for Akers, and he's paying off. Like, this is classic Leonard Fournette, right? Leonard Fournette, Zeke Elliott. These are guys that when they really start getting going, they've worn down the defense, right? Yeah. It's those 15 to 23 carries that they've done their damage on the defense. The defense is worn out, and it's like, you're mine, bitch, and then go.
You need the 3-yard carries to earn the 6-yard carries. Is
correct. So. Absolutely. And and here's the thing with Akers. I don't know if this is an off-season audition for him. The way that the Rams franchise is right now, obviously, you're still playing to win games. And, you're likely, you'll get cut back next year. Hopefully you get Donald back next year if he decides to, continue to play. Stafford should hopefully be healthy.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of room for improvement with this team, but you have no draft picks, especially early round draft picks. Yep. So it's like, can you potentially move a young running back like Cam Akers to a team that needs a good young running back? Get a couple, maybe, even like mid to late round draft picks, something that you can plug in.
You need lottery tickets. Cam Akers ain't your lottery ticket.
Exactly. Cam Akers right now, is, if he is in fact a good running back, you're wasting him on a team that,
precisely,
is just not really going anywhere.
And would rather throw 45 times a game next year if Matt Stafford is back. So
exactly. So you need somebody that doesn't need 20 carries to finally get the job done.
Precisely.
You need somebody that can do their job in 15 touches, right? And I think with this draft class, there's quite a few running backs that you could get, in those 2 to 4 rounds, top four rounds that can replicate that and do what you actually need to do for this offense. So regardless of whether he keeps balling out these last couple of games or not, I think this is it, especially if you've been stuck. And I do say this term, if you've been stuck with Cam Akers on your dynasty roster, because I had a chance to move him for a 1st round pick at the beginning of the season, and I was very hesitant. I was like, man, I have zero depth at running back. I think I just got to bite the bullet. And then of course, he sucks. Then I'm just like, God, I wish I had that 1st round pick right now. Yeah. But, hopefully there's room for this. If he gets moved in the offseason or, at the very end of the season when he goes on this hot run, put him on the trade block, see what you can negotiate.
I love it. To answer your question, he hit 5 yards last week. But again, it's your perfect narrative.
Back-to-back weeks. All right.
He's getting healthier. And that's something I've been preaching this whole time was I'm not anti-Cam Akers. I'm anti the Achilles injury, and I'm certainly anti the Achilles injury in less than a year. That's just an awful track record on that. It was never going to play out. So
absolutely.
Our buddies Elixirs and Czar apparently reading the show sheet. Elixirs gives us Akers, and then Czar immediately gives us Hawkinson. Who is your next player?
TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah.
16 targets, 13 receptions, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns. We officially have a new tight end 2 in fantasy. And it's TJ Hawkinson. This trade has worked wonders for him. They have unlocked this potential that we apparently saw with him when he was a top 8 selection from Detroit all those years ago. We talked about this ad nauseum from the offseason. This Vikings offense is going to look eerily similar to the Rams and what they've been able to do.
Apparently all they needed was a tight end.
We saw what Cooper Kupp did last year. Guess what? Justin Jefferson's doing a lot of those same things. We've seen what Tyler Higbee can do in that offense. Guess what? We're seeing it now with TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah.
I would wager to say that Hawkinson's doing it even better than Tyler Higbee, who
without a doubt
also had 2 touchdowns yesterday in that game against the Broncos. So, at
this point, that helps nobody with Higbee, though. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have Higbee, you're probably not in the playoffs, or somebody probably dropped them throughout all the, the pendulum swinging with the quarterbacks and all that. I think they're on their 4th starting quarterback this year. It's rough with the Rams, but this to me not only lends some credence to the next couple games or the next game really for fantasy managers, but going into next year too. He's entering, I believe, the final year of his rookie contract.
Yep.
Adam Thielen's going to be, what, 33, 34 next
33.
year?
Yep.
And you're already starting to see the pendulum kind of swing away from him in this offense.
100%.
This offense could basically be Jefferson, Hawkinson, and Cook.
And you have an aging. Let's be clear, Dalvin Cook is on the wrong side of his running back career.
Yeah. So this is Hawkinson should probably be a top 3 tight end in 2023, and I don't think that's very much a hot take right now.
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, it depends on the respect you have for Andrews and who his quarterback's going to be. Obviously, King Kelsey, and then honestly, you could make the argument Hawkinson over Andrews. You could be making it a top 2 argument right now.
I would absolutely put Dallas Goedert in that conversation.
100%.
I think you still have to include Pitts just from a talent perspective.
And Kittle.
But a lot of his value is going to lie in what that team does in the offseason to try to get him the football.
It's going to be interesting bringing it back to fantasy to see where ADPs end up falling with these guys. And we're eventually going to be transitioning this show back to our mock draft show in the offseason. And it's going to be really interesting to see Kelsey, in my opinion, and I've said it for 2 years at this point, Kelsey's a first-round fantasy pick, and you're a fool if he's not. But I've been bitching for years that there should be no second or third round fantasy picks at tight end. And it's going to be interesting to see if people let the value come to them, because if all 5 of these guys, Pitts, Goddard, Andrews, Kittle, and Hawkinson are all 5th and 6th round picks, there's value there of getting the right guy. But if one of them's a 3rd and 2 of them are a 4th, the one you wait on is going to be the best one is plain and simply how it's going to shake out.
100%. Speaking of the Falcons.
Yeah. Tyler Algier. It's very interesting to see back-to-back great weeks with Desmond Ridder at quarterback. And obviously they've had to change their offense up a little bit, but there's no reason for Atlanta to move on and get another running back, which is something people kind of keep wanting to do with Atlanta because of the Derrick Henry history with Arthur Smith. I don't see a reason. Algier was a very well-regarded running back. I think they got him in the 4th or 5th round.
No, they got him in the 5th. And that's kind of the thing with the dynasty, college players. They're always talking about draft capital and things like that. And I get it. They don't have anything truly heavily invested in Algier, but this is also a really deep running back class that's coming in. They could potentially find somebody better if they want to. And it goes back to Jacksonville with James Robinson. It goes back to
Miami with Myles Gaskin.
Miami,
what I was going to make the
Gaskin sucks. I'm sorry.
But he was serviceable for 2 years
absolutely.
On a 7th round rookie contract. And I think there's something to that there's no need to invest heavily. But you're absolutely right that the
Carter with the Jets and then drafting Bryce Hall or
precisely, yeah.
It's just teams will have certain values on certain players, and it really doesn't matter what you already have. It's what happens in the moment when the draft comes. If you're being smart and you're taking the best player available, sometimes that's going to be a running back. Sometimes
and exactly, And so we're on the same page there. I'm just saying there's no need to invest heavily, and there are plenty of other holes for the Atlanta Falcons to fill. Speaking with teams with holes to fill, you did not think that I was going to go an hour and 10-minute show without bringing up Gardner.
Well, we're at the 58-minute mark, so
there you go. 355 yards yesterday. Didn't quite get it done for the Philadelphia Eagles, but got it done for fantasy. Top 10 quarterback for fantasy. But way more importantly, in the NFL, I just have a very big problem if this guy is not a starting quarterback next year. If Indy doesn't go out and get Gardner Minshew, just kill or trade Jonathan Taylor, do something, because you don't want to win, plain and simple. And I could say the exact same thing about Washington and Terry McLaurin. Gardner Minshew should be starting on one of those 2 teams next year, and I'm talking whatever it takes. Now, I will throw out Indy has a small chance of landing a quarterback in the draft, so it's going to be interesting to see how all of the quarterbacks kind of shake out. But then there are teams that aren't going to land a quarterback in the draft. Atlanta, Carolina. Josh, you brought up that Carolina better not be going into with Sam Darnold next season. And if they make the playoffs, they're screwed. They're not if they go get Gardner Minshew. I'm going to throw New Orleans in there. I'm going to throw the Jets in there if the Zach Wilson experiment's over. And then you could also argue Baltimore and Green Bay based on what happens with their current quarterbacks. These are teams that if Gardner Minshew isn't starting next year, I am losing faith in a lot of teams in the NFL. Plain and simple. Get my guy a starting job.
Yeah, You know, the thing with Minshew, and I love him to death. I love his play style, I love his personality, and really, he's hard not to want to root for. But you know, he can, just like most quarterbacks, you know, he gets skittish when pressure hits him in the
100%.
in the face, and you know, you saw that in this game. And
the one interception was just a sailed ball.
Well, the one thing that I didn't point out in our Up with the Bird section, both of those interceptions that he threw, he was targeting Quez Watkins, our number 3 wide receiver, over the middle.
Backup quarterback.
He is a
backup wide receiver.
Get him on the outside running go routes. That is where you need to put Quez Watkins, not over the middle.
And he doesn't have the body to make those catches over the middle.
And he literally got out muscled for one of those interceptions.
Yep.
Like, the defender just took the ball away from him. So, like, you know, for everything that Minshew does well, there's obviously going to be some brushback on some of these turnovers. But again, that's the makeup of somebody who probably has a career as a longevity wise as a backup, but can be a spot starter like a Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? Fitzpatrick was always good as like a spot starter. Like, to me, that is and probably will be Minshew's career arc.
I agree completely. I'm just saying right now, he's in those prime years. Let's give him a couple.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And that's the thing, is there's teams that should be taking advantage of this. They should be looking at this game and seeing what Minshew was able to do with the talent that he had and say, you know what, let's get everything in place. Like, Indy's offensive line, I feel like, should be able to bounce back next year.
I agree.
Right? They have a great number 1 in Michael Pittman. You drafted Alec Pierce. You've got Paris Campbell in the slot, and you have Jonathan Taylor at running back. Gardner Minshew could do some really good things in Indy. He really could. And mind you, Chris Ballard, who right now is the GM of Indy, I don't know if he will be next year.
Yeah.
But he saw Minshew pretty up close and personal all those years with Jacksonville. So
exactly.
I don't think that's a bad call. So kudos.
And there's an Indy-Philly connection with the coaching staff. So there's a lot that goes in there where these teams might be talking to each other. So, final segment, always the best segment of the show. Chill the fuck out, for bad, for good. These are players who either were way better or way worse than they need to be. Josh, get us started.
I'll start with the Bills running backs. We got a couple questions on Saturday when, you know, they were asking about, you know, would you start Devin Singletary, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And it made sense, you know, the conditions of the game, super cold, super windy. It definitely favored the running backs. Bills just don't run the football. And they don't really run it effectively unless it's in Josh Allen's hands. Singletary has some pop weeks every once in a while. James Cook has looked pretty solid in this last half of the season. But, you know, I'm not going to trust my fantasy football playoff matchups on guys that really haven't proven anything just because of a good matchup. And you know what? They balled out. Singletary, 106 yards and a touchdown. Cook, 99 yards and a touchdown. Both of them were top 10 running backs as of right now going into Monday night. So you know what? Kudos to them. But they get the Bengals next week on Monday night. And as our good buddy Joe Zolo likes to point out, when DJ Reader is playing defensive tackle, the Bengals are a top 5 run defense. So don't get too cocky with Singletary and Cook next week.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Keep going.
I'll continue with Isaiah Pacheco. We talked, you know, pretty much ad nauseum. Hey, Pacheco's the guy that's handling all the carries, and you know what? He is. 58 yards. That sucked. But Jerick McKinnon, before this week, 2 back-to-back overall RB1 performances. Came back to earth a little bit this week. Obviously, I'm fairly certain the temperatures, the weather probably played a lot into that. And, you know, KC was just kind of, let's just get out of here. Let's just get out of here with a win. And they did. But, you know, KC gets Denver next week. And as we talked about in the show, it looks like Denver's just gassed. They're tired. And Cam Akers just fucking shredded them. You're still playing Isaiah Pacheco this week.
I think you have to, absolutely. And obviously, Jerick McKinnon is a must start at this point in fantasy football because they're just.
I mean, he was still a top 15 option, if I'm not mistaken. So
scored a touchdown. So for me, I'm sticking with the running backs, and we kind of touched on this already, the Cam Akers thing. We've seen this end of season kind of emergence from Cam Akers in just about every year of his career at this point. So I agree with what Josh was saying is use this as an opportunity to shop Cam Akers. Do not use this as he's back sort of thing. I don't trust these Achilles injuries. move this guy. And then don't overreact to Miles Sanders just because he has taken a huge dump all over your entire fantasy football playoffs. Don't take away from the really solid season that Miles Sanders has put together. We gave this guy so much shit last year for not scoring any touchdowns. And then this year he completely bounces back with, 11 rushing touchdowns. Hasn't done a lot through the air, but as Josh has pointed out, that's not their offense. I think he's likely back in Philadelphia. Josh, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't. I know he's a Pennsylvania guy, went to Penn State, obviously being drafted by Philly. It's going to depend on the market, and it's going to depend on how much money he realistically believes he should get, right?
And that's
yes, he's coming off a career season. As I've mentioned a couple times throughout the show, this upcoming draft class is very deep, and Philly does not have a lot of needs.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at this team right now, like, you're basically looking at, you know what? We need to build depth, and we need to take the best player available. Safety, I think, is probably going to be the biggest need. CJ Gardner-Johnson is a free agent. Hopefully he'll be back from injury this week against his former team, the Saints. But, he's a free agent, tied for the league lead in interceptions in the NFL. So he's going to get paid. And I don't know if Philly forks over the money to do it, because they need to be able to save money for the Jalen Hurts extension, which probably should happen this offseason. So I don't think you can justify paying, Miles Sanders when you likely have to pay Jalen Hurts $35+ million a year. And if Sanders is willing to take maybe a 2 or 3 year deal at $6 million per, I think that maybe they could make that work. But again, I'm very curious to see what this offseason looks like for the free agent running backs, because you have Saquon Barkley as a free agent, Josh Jacobs is a free agent, Miles Sanders is a free agent. Those are 3 Pro Bowl running backs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Monty as well, right?
David Montgomery is a free agent as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Montgomery, Jacobs, and Sanders all came out in the same draft class. So and then Barkley was the year before that, who is playing on his fifth year option right now. So and that's the thing, is that, over the last couple of years, and we saw a couple $8 million a year running back contracts last offseason with James Conner and Leonard Fournette. So teams are still willing to pay running backs, but I don't think that they're going to be looking to pay the $12 million per plus that Kamara signed for, or David Johnson back in the day signed for.
Oh yeah, that David Johnson contract broke on football. So.
Exactly. So it's things like that where it's McCaffrey I get, because you could make a case that he's the most dynamic running back in the NFL. He's basically a receiver that runs the ball. And Barkley kind of fits into that same mold. I don't think Miles Sanders is that guy. Yes, he's capable as a pass catcher. And we've seen that. Obviously this has been a career year for him, but expecting him to be a 300+ touch running back in the NFL is just not realistic.
Yeah. No, absolutely fair. I want to throw Gators comment up here, because I think Josh Jacobs is not happening.
That's going to cost too much, but
Bijan Robinson,
I can see
actual possibility.
I am very curious to see, because as I mentioned, Philly doesn't have a ton of needs. And that Saints pick is probably going to be a top 10 pick. I don't love the idea of spending a top 10 draft pick on a running back, but I think you could make the case that Bijan Robinson is one of the 10 best players coming out in this year's draft class.
Yeah.
He's just that fucking good with the football in his hands. So could I see it? Sure. Because his value is only going to get propped up because of how good our offensive line is.
100%.
And obviously when you have the rushing threat of Jalen Hurts, and I've made this argument for years. I'm not opposed to spending a first round draft pick on a running back. And I'll tell you exactly why. Especially if you can get him later in the draft, from pick 20 on. Yeah. Because those contracts aren't near as high as top 10 picks.
Yeah.
Okay. It's very manageable under the cap. You have the 5th year option. And then you have the option to franchise them for 2 years if they're really good. And you don't ever have to sign them to a long-term contract. You can just run them to death on a position that is you can churn
supposed
through.
to be run to death.
Exactly. So I'm not opposed to that thinking. When you spend a second overall pick like the Giants did on Saquon, that's a problem. Yeah. So I think I'd be okay with top 15.
And we've
top
talked
10,
about this before. You guys are probably in an enormous trade back situation with that.
Absolutely.
Pick. So yeah,
absolutely.
Gonna be. I'd love to see the Eagles land something like that. Normally, guys, we'd end the show with my deep waivers. I can make up some excuse about how you shouldn't be starting waiver guys in your finals, but I fucking forgot. I got all my other picks in and forgot. I did a quick look while Josh was talking there, which is explanation for some of the dull spots. There are no running backs I would play off of waivers. Use your roster, start guys who have already established themselves. Kendrick Bourne is interesting playing Miami next week. Isaiah Hodgins and even Richie James are interesting playing Indianapolis. And then one guy who's a little bit more rostered, 30% rostered, Jahan Dotson has really come on the last couple of weeks. And they have somebody who's not good next week. I have it up here. Cleveland. They have Cleveland at home next week. So I'm very interested to see if Jahan Dotson can keep this streak going. Cleveland's going to focus very much on Terry McLaurin. So those would be the guys. You can definitely find wide receivers on waivers. At this point at running back, if you're looking for a running back, it's bad news bears. Yeah, that's literally all you can do. As always, we're going to get out of here with Josh telling us how he feels the Monday night's going to go. So let's do it, Josh.
Keenan Allen's going to get me 15 fantasy points, and I'm going to win the championship. I'm going to advance to the championship.
Well, what I was going to say is there's no more important thing to watch tonight than how Justin Herbert bounces back from what could be called a very bad game against Tennessee and Indianapolis for as bad as they've been.
I just want to see them close. Yes. I want to see them end a game. Because their first half game plans with Jeff Saturday have been phenomenal. And they've been really good.
Apart.
And then they just break down like they have no idea what to do. And that will play in Justin Herbert's favor because the dude can sling it. And he has the weapons to go and sling it with. So it's going to be interesting to me to see, especially how Stephon Gilmore plays. You know, are they going to move him on and off of Keenan and back and forth between Allen and Mike Williams, and you know, how does Josh Palmer play into this? Like, I mean, it to me, it's going to be a good battle because the Colts, I think they have a good defense, but it is very streaky.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was going to bring up is
dog shit.
The Colts have, for as bad as you would call what they've been this season, they've actually played really well against like fantasy quarterbacks and fantasy wide receivers. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm curious to see how Michael Pittman does. Nick Foles is starting this week. Yeah. So I'm just kind of like a little nervous, not going to lie. So, you know.
Yeah, tough to trust anybody in this game tonight. And there are a lot of fantasy matchups on the backs of Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and Justin Herbert. So I'm going to be interested to see how that goes. And probably Michael Pittman as well. And that's the one I'm probably most worried about. So
yeah, I have in our Club Fantasy Writers chat, I'm going against Austin, and I have Pittman left. And he has, I believe, Keenan Allen and Cameron Dicker, the kicker.
Okay.
So I'm like, while I need Keenan Allen to score like 14.6 to win me one matchup to get into the finals, I need him
to slow down a little bit.
But I need Pittman to outscore him, basically, is what I'm getting at.
I love it. And this is what this type of year is where you're trying to figure out those little weird things. We thank each and every one of you for tuning in. We hope you are in many championships. A lot of you guys have shared that, and we absolutely love it. You'll be able to catch Club Fantasy on live shows on Wednesday this week and then Saturday for our Start Sit show. Once again, we also do a wonderful Start Sit show on Thursdays. The Sneaky Flex with the Sneaky Girls, Rowan and Maisie. Make sure you're tuning in to that. It's the best 15 minutes you'll spend all week, and that leads you up to our IDP show. Long story short, you need to be subscribed to our YouTube channel. We are closing in on 500 followers, and when we hit it, we're going to be doing another giveaway. We can't wait to give you guys some merch. As far as articles go, we're going to have our full slate of articles again this week for at least this last week. We're still going to have a lot of our betting articles continuing even into the actual NFL playoffs, so we're going to be there to help you. Josh, any parting words for the people?
Best of luck to everybody. Hope your Monday Night Miracle comes into play, and Ryan and I will talk about when we're going to start Monday Hangxiety or end Monday Hangxiety, whether we continue it throughout the NFL playoffs or if we just jump right into mock draft Monday. So
I'll tell you right now, I'm not ready for mock draft, so this show is going to probably continue. Need a
All
damn
right,
break,
fair
man.
enough.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and backup running backs are supposed to be more efficient. Have a great Monday.